So next one up, Holger. I think he is probably the preeminent star of disruption. Well, you started with music with AUPEO, and AUPEO just got acquired last year, 2 years ago. 3 years ago, he was very successful before with, in the whole Gate 5 Nokia area. And just this year, he won an award at CES as the best innovation, best of show. Now in a context of being part of a Japanese company, Panasonic, and where we're crossing music into car systems, mobility. I think you are at the forefront of the whole disruption, perfect storm, whatever. You take it away. Please tell us what you're doing now. Holger, please.
Thank you, Harald. Thank you for bringing all us here. Thank you for your passion. It's amazing, as always. It's not anymore. Good morning. Hello, everybody. It's a very exciting environment here because usually on tech conferences, etc., you talk about everything. We had the NOAA two weeks ago in Berlin, and there is e-health, and there is, of course, mobility, and there's fintech, etc. But having an event that is so focused solely and exclusively on urban mobility and connected mobility is amazing. So let's get started. Welcome to the third age of mobility. What does it mean? It means that I actually want to show you in the next 50 minutes that the world you're living in, and you got a little idea over the morning, will not be the world you will be living in 10 years from now, and that maybe now in the next 50 minutes from a little bit different perspective, and think about that maybe from a perspective of a country where a lot of the economy and the economic wealth is depending, for example, on an industry like the automotive industry. Let's have a look what this means. So, first age of mobility, right after mankind learned walking, is the invention of the wheel, right? That is something I think that we all can agree on. With the invention on the wheel, man became mobile. So, and then for a long time, about 6,000 years, nothing happened. And then, end of the 19th century, the German guy from Stuttgart invented the engine. And that is something that actually brought a big disruption, and we saw the first car this morning in one of the presentations, I think in your presentation, Oliver, of Mr. Banz, which made a complete new way in terms of how cities work, how people lived, etc. We know that. So, and the third age of mobility, from my point of view, is actually bring the internet to the car or bring the internet into the mobility. And the same impact as the engine made to the wheel, the internet will make to the way of cars and the way of mobility as we live it today. Let's see a little bit what this means. We actually will have a complete new ecosystem, and there will be new rules. And the question is, who actually will drive these rules in a very traditional industry like the automotive industry? For 80 years, for almost 100 years, we just saw it, this industry is a very powerful, very strong industry who set the rules their own. Let's see how this looks into the future. We could see, or we could say, the consumer will rule. But how does it look traditionally, historically? So this is a quote from a executive from a big corporation, right? We don't need to know what consumers want, we tell them what is good to them. So that's something I'm asking you. Which company this is from? Nokia? You remember Nokia, right? Apple? Volkswagen? Apple? Yeah. Actually, it's a quote from a Volkswagen executive, and that's very understandable, right? Because for 80 years they said, I mean, what influence do you guys have to build a car? None. Absolutely none. That were the car makers, and that is the attitude that's very strong in this industry. But if we're looking what's going on at the moment, and we see what's going on in the sharing community, it's frightening if you, it should be frightening if you're a car manufacturer, right? Because 50% of people are sharing cars and then will buy a car. You know what this means? You don't sell your product, the product that you do for consumers. That is something that is a fundamental impact, or will mean a fundamental impact, to economies like the German or the American or others. Or see this one, right? If you would need to use an autonomous driving car, self-driving car, every day, which manufacturer would you trust, right? That's from a survey McKinsey did together with Wired 2 years ago in the Valley, right? And it turned out there are companies they would trust to who even don't build cars yet, right? Number 1, Google. Number 2, Apple. And the first company on the list was Tesla, right? But not Mercedes, General Motors, or Chrysler. Meaning that the ecosystem and the value chain of the ecosystem is shifting in a way that no one actually could imagine a couple of years ago. There are new players, new kids on the block, right? Which actually could mean my next car will be a Google or Apple or Uber, etc. Let's see. Which fundamentally means that the power of the consumer will drive this because the ecosystem is something the consumer decides for, and that's a fundamental threat to the establishment, right? Maybe, right? On the other side, do we build the ecosystem? I don't know. Do we consumers build the ecosystem? What is the ecosystem? Ecosystem is a community of living organisms in conjunction with non-living components of their environment interacting as a system. Meaning, to make it simple, there are various parts. They somehow have to play together, work together. And if this is going in a nice way, then something is happening, right? So, let's move back 2003, right? We had 3G networks, Java-enabled phones, right? We had ringtones, Java-enabled, we had Java games, and so on and so forth. But coming from 2003, it took us, and I worked for Nokia, it took us about 5 years before this started even to become a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem and economy, right? So we had WAP portals. You remember WAP portals? No one remembers because no one knew, right? And the point for that is that the bits and pieces were in place, right? As I said, 3G networks and so on and so forth, but they didn't really work with each other. Looking up, let's say the lotto or the sport results from the weekend on Monday morning on your WAP browser, if you only knew that you have a WAP browser and you have the understanding that there's a URL you can open on your Java-enabled phone, a website with, it costs you 6 Deutschmark or euros or dollars at that time. Because we had, for example, no flat fees. There were no media flat contracts. It costs you by the bit and the byte, right? That is something that we see at the moment in the connected car environment and in the connected mobility in the same way. We have 4G networks. We're talking about 5G. We don't need 40-mile long cables connect the car to, right? That's something problem solved, right? We have apps, we have the smartphones, we have whatever, telematics, road safety, and so on and so forth. But believe me, being in this for quite a while, it's not yet ticking, the ecosystem, right? Why it's not? Because it's complex. It's freaking complex, right? You need to be safe, right? I mean, you all read this article that some hackers from whatever community hacked a BMW while driving. It happened that apparently the connected drive environment of BMW, which is 10 years old, even doesn't have a HTTPS safety security layer. It was an open network, because 10 years ago no one even thought about to hack a car, right? And that goes for iBeacon, IoT, and so on and so forth. So it's something where if the ecosystem will be in place, right, things will work, meaning ecosystem might rule. And if we see who's building this ecosystem, right, you would think, or let's say people in Detroit, people in Ingolstadt, people in Munich, in Stuttgart, in wherever, they think they built the ecosystem. What they traditionally did with the beautiful devices they gave to us, they told us how they look like, right? But that's not anymore the case. And why it's not the case anymore, I told you before. Oh, look this, 5 technologies we will change our lives. And I mean, everyone who spoke this morning actually had cut the same slide in his presentation, right? Talk about robots, autonomous driving cars, augmented reality, real-time machine translation, right? Drinking a sake, speaking Japanese, I love that one. Artificial intelligence, that was a list published by Spiegel Online, one of Germany's most popular websites. But if we only change this slide a little bit, that's the shopping list of Google, right? Fundamentally, that's exactly what these guys bought over the past year. I think only 12 months. Oculus, right? the robotics company, and so on and so forth. Meaning that in a way where it's not only about to form metal and putting 4 rubber pieces on it, right? Where the value chain is going to shift, new people going to rule people or companies or environments that will rule the ecosystem. A car is not a mobile phone. That's something that is important. So if you read very often these days that exactly the same what happened to Nokia will also happen to the car makers once Apple is in the game, etc. But the value chain is the same, right? Apple just created the App Store, and with the App Store, a complete new way of value chain as we see it today with the hardware makers who are relying on Android. They don't make money with anything. The money makes Google, right? Now it's the question, is it really that bad to the OEM? The OEM is the car manufacturer in the professional term, because definitely he also has some power and things in his hand. First of all, it's complex. It's freaking complex to build a car, right? And Zetsche just said a couple of weeks ago, the CEO of Daimler, said Tesla has 85% of what we have, right? It will take them another 20 years for the remaining 15%, but the speed they got to the 85% is mind-boggling. That is something that's changing. We have rapid innovation, right? There's a company in China called Quarus. Ever heard about Quarus? Would you ever believe that you would drive a Chinese car on German streets or American streets? I mean, they brought their cars 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. They get tested, crashed, and we sent them home, right? Now Quarus, actually, they hired German, French, American, English engineers. They put money in. Chinese have money. Brought the car here, tested it, 5-star, done. You can go and source a car. Yeah? You don't need to build a car. So, it's complex. Why is it complex? Because you have street regulation, right? So a car is not your living room. Believe me, it's something freaking complex to bring stable connectivity to a car. And we just said, BMW to get hacked while driving 180 kilometers per hour or 140 miles per hour, different thing. Safety, what I just said, liabilities, right? If a car kills a person, someone has a problem, the car manufacturer. So it will not happen too early that Nestle goes and sources a car and says, if you buy the next packet of chocolate, we give you a car. That's not the way, right? It's complex, and that's something that these guys built over the past 100 years, and they understand tremendously. User experience. Of course, we all love an iPhone experience better than an in-car touchscreen experience, right? That's true. But there are a lot of buttons around, right? And there are a lot of things that playing together here, and that's something that they control, and the consumer acceptance. When people talk about autonomous driving cars, yeah, and living here in Germany, being a global person, no doubt about that, I believe it takes us another 20 years before people will accept that cars will driving around in German streets or European streets just without any control or just with a red emergency button. It will take a while, right? Public transport, different thing, fixed routes, etc. But before cars will going, etc., it takes a while, at least 1.5 generations. So that's what I said before, right? The car industry, because they have different cycles than a phone industry, right? About 10 years to prepare a car, plan a car, build a car, bring it to the market, etc. They see what's coming. And most of you maybe read the interview with Zetsche, where the press all over the world said, "Oh, these guys is oversleeping what's coming, and he will get killed," because he said, if there were rumors that Mercedes or Daimler plan to build smartphones, then Apple would not be sleepless at night, and the same applies for me. So if Apple buys a car, I will be prepared. They will be prepared, right? No doubt about that, but they will see fundamental pressure. Nevertheless, never underestimate them and see that sheer driving pleasure meets Vorsprung durch Technik. That's something they built for 50, 60 years, and that's something that will not disappear just overnight because some people are better in connectivity. That's also something, brand recognition. Of course, if you buy a car with a good brand, That's something that will survive in terms of safety and so on. On the other side, we saw the survey from the Valley, right? Autonomous driving car, I buy a Google. Good, so much about that. Now comes the tricky part, because in times of smartphones and Market, etc., they always will quote you on that, right? Or me, in a year from now, if I were right or not. But I think it's a kind of a fun part. Let's see. So, I believe that connected cars will be one of the strongest innovation drivers within the next decade. Right? It's such a big industry, it's such an important industry, it's the foundation of the wealth of a lot of countries and parts of the world, and it will drive innovation tremendously, starting from parts that Tom just talked about, where we have multimodal routing type of elements. Mobility will change very much. Right? That's what I said. People's way of being mobile will change dramatically. Right? It's something that will be more passive and safer. And here comes the good news, right? A lot of those problems that we see at the moment, and people crying because of the climate change, which is right, and super metropolitan areas, we will solve this problem with software. It will happen, right? Maybe not in 10 years, but something that's going to happen. On the way, we are on that way already now, right? That's something I mentioned, right? Don't believe that ecosystems already ticking, right? It's like back in 2003, building app development agency in 2003 was a bad idea, because companies like Vodafone or Mannesmann at that time, they thought they built the ecosystem, they get 80% of the revenues, developers get 20%. That's what we're getting there. 3 to 4 or 5 years, but it's not yet too late. That's the message here, right? That's what I'm only can repeat over and over. Ecosystem is not working at invest into it. If you have a little bit money and there is a small intelligent team working in, I don't know what, IoT type of iBeacon, Bluetooth Low Energy, payment system for parking, real-time parking system, put your money in, right? I mean, I wish you that you bet on the right company, but one of the companies will be very big in the near future. That's the thing, we talked about that, right? Everyone believes Apple is building a car. Are they building a car? Of course they're building a car, yeah. Will it be about the car? It will not be about the car. It will be about something like a new way of being mobile. This is what this company did very well and is doing very well. If they change our life, they change it fundamentally. And fundamentally changing our lives doesn't mean to put a car next to a Tesla, a Mercedes, or a BMW, right? It will be a combined system of integrated payment, car sharing, etc. It's a kind of experience that they might even going to license to other car manufacturers, where you enter a car and you have an Apple experience, but it's not about the car. It's not about selling numbers of cars. That's pretty clear, right? We're living in a world that is very dynamic, right? Innovation and disruption will change this world. Very well-known car brands, we all grew up, and we are all very familiar with, will not exist anymore in 10 years from now, right? There will be definitely famous car brands that will be there, others not. It's not about apps, it's about experience, right? It's something where you say it's fundamentally different to use something like a streaming music app in your home environment than in a car. It will have to do a lot. It will have to do a lot with predictive environment and so on, personalization. So, I ran over. Yeah, 3 minutes. Very sorry. Thank you very much. Thanks, Harald.